Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. I am back after having been floored for a bit over the last couple of days with a nasty cold. I am able to do a video recording again, and in a way I was kind of lucky because the timing worked out well for me. Over the last couple of days while I've been resting on the lounge, Apple decided to drop a bunch of amazing games on the Apple Arcade to play. So I have had a lot of stuff to play while I've been resting. And I wanted to do a video to talk about the Apple Arcade today because I haven't done that yet. And it launched about 6 months ago, and I thought now, with this huge release that has just happened, would be a good time to look at it and where it's at right now. I have borrowed a lot of footage from elsewhere for this video because unfortunately I don't know how I can go about capturing my own footage with the tools that I have right now. However, I do also have reviews going up for all of the more notable games in this new wave up on digitallydownloaded.net, so I recommend you check them out when you get a moment to see what my thoughts are about what each of these individual games are like. Now, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's talk about the Apple Arcade. So the thing is, it actually had a pretty strong launch late last year with a bunch of mid-range games that offered well-made, tight gameplay experiences and did away with all the kind of crap that hurts mobile games these days. There's no ads or gacha mechanics in these games on any level. There's no microtransactions. That was all part of the deal with the Apple Arcade. You subscribed up front and you never had to deal with that stuff again. And we got games like Choo Choo Rocket, Universe, Overland, Mini Motorways, Bleak Sword, Dear Reader, and plenty more others. And it actually made the Apple Arcade launch one of the better new platform launches that we've seen in recent years. I remember when it did launch, I was actually in Japan at the time, and I didn't have access to my Apple TV, obviously, but I did have my phone, and I actually spent a lot of time playing those games on the trains and whatever as I was traveling around Japan, because the stuff that was on there was very good, and it got me back into mobile games. I hadn't been playing mobile games for the longest time because I'm not that interested in gachas and ad-supported games generally, so the fact that Apple Arcade actually made me pick up my phone as a gaming device again just shows how strong it was as a launch. But then things went quiet. There were a couple of game releases here and there, but nothing that I felt really compelled to talk about, and indeed I didn't write about the Apple Arcade again after the first couple of weeks of launch. I kept my subscription going, mostly because it was so cheap, but I actually was thinking about cancelling that as well just recently, as I just wasn't playing the games from the arcade anymore. I played all the ones that I really liked to death, basically, and I just wasn't finding much inspiration from the ones that were getting released. This update, however, is just spectacular. To run through a couple of examples from it, Clap Hands Golf is some of the best work that I've ever seen from the Everybody's Golf developer, and I've played pretty much all of their games. Fantasian is Mistwalker's homage to classic PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy titles, and it is just done so beautifully that as a fan of the Final Fantasy series from back then and beyond, it just makes me want to cry in joy that I'm getting this game, which I just did not expect. I had no idea it was coming, and it is just delivering what me as a classic Final Fantasy fan really wants to play. Another example is World of Demons, which is a yokai-themed action game, and it comes to us from Maverick developer Platinum Games, and that developer has a massive library of excellent work, but in my opinion it is their best title yet, aside from the one time they collaborated with Yoko Taro to make Nier Automata, of course. Being second to Nier Automata is pretty good for that developer. Those three games alone I would happily pay full price for, and they're all currently exclusive to the Apple Arcade to boot. Now, who knows if that exclusivity is going to be permanent, but I've already seen plenty of people mulling over picking up an Apple TV just to play one of those three specific games. Add to that, there's a new Taiko the Drum game, some fun casual titles like the colourful and chuckle-worthy Simon's Cat Puzzler, a quality rendering of the Oregon Trail, which is one of the all-time classic video games, of course, and there's even a cut-down but microtransaction-free NBA 2K game, which actually makes it in so many ways the superior experience. And pull all this together, and there is just so much genuine quality here in this one release that Apple dropped on us that it's almost impossible to conceive actually playing it all. download these games to the Apple TV and pair up a DualShock controller, and the Apple TV more than holds its weight as a games console now. Not just as an entertainment thing for your movies and whatever, it really does work as a games console. There are now 180 games on the Apple Arcade, and while a lot of those are best experienced on mobile devices, we're talking about things like Threes, Monument Valley, Fruit Ninja, and The Room 2, all excellent games or classics in their own right, but better played on mobile. Even when you put those out of the equation, I would still say that around 50 or so of the games in that lineup are elevated up and would offer you what you would call a console experience if you played it on your Apple TV. When you look at the utter failure of Google Stadia and Amazon to make inroads into video games, you would have to say that Apple is, on the low key, a growing force to be reckoned with and doing the right things. They're getting the right developers on board, they are getting good quality games onto their platform, and it is resonating. So where Google and Amazon really struggled, Apple is finding a way to succeed. Now, of course, I do remain cautious of subscription services. As I've mentioned in other videos, I do believe that they represent a hyper-commoditization of video games, and that is not in anyone's best interest. It's not in the best interest of the game developers, it's not in the best interest of the consumers. When that happens, it effectively forces developers to make games in certain ways, else the structure and revenue models of subscription services actually hurt them. There are types of games that you cannot monetize effectively when it's done via a subscription. So if those are to become the default, we would effectively lose a fair range of different video games. But the difference here, and where I think Apple Arcade stands out and is something that I'm quite happy to support, is that Apple has actually elevated mobile games out of an even nastier place by doing this. Thanks to free-to-play muscling out every other monetization model, Apple was facing a real issue with its devices as a gaming platform. They were all ad-laden, microtransaction-filled, exploitative, shallow games. When the App Store first released with the iPhone and people were downloading games onto it for the first time, there was a period where everyone was thinking this is going to be a great way for game developers to explore their creativity and put small, creative, different ideas out there. You could charge a couple of dollars for those games, and you would get an audience for them because the Apple audience was so large. That unfortunately went away when game prices became default at 99 cents and then went to free to play, and everything else really suffers. You can't put a game for $10 on the App Store anymore and then hope that it's going to sell. It's just not going to happen. So there was a real issue with the games industry just pushing everything out that wasn't free to play, and free to play comes with a whole bunch of microtransactions and other nastiness that just kind of ruins the platform as a gaming experience. And like I said, I haven't picked up an iPhone for gaming purposes for a long time until the Apple Arcade came along. What was happening was all the concentration of the wealth was also going to a tiny few companies at the very top of the Apple ecosystem, and it was impossible for any other developer to try something creative and different. The consolidation within the App Store or mobile game development space was obscene, and it was also hampering the creativity that was available to players because there were just a few ideas that were rolling around within a ever shrinking number of companies that were able to monetize that. So as I said, to counter all of that, the Apple Arcade is a great idea. Pitch the price low of the subscription because consumers are by now far too accustomed to not paying for games on mobile, and then make the value proposition of paying that subscription very clear. By doing so, you get dozens of games, including games from top-tier developers that are completely free of every element that annoys people about mobile games. Throw in the ability to play via controller for a full console experience when you're at home, and suddenly Apple has again incentivized developers to create quality, with the gameplay experience itself being the priority rather than the focus as it is with free-to-play, with the entire project around the monetization and monetization alone. It shifts the conversation in a great way from games as content, as mobile game developers always think about it, to games as kind of products, as works of art, as Platinum Games would tell you they are. And just when it seemed like this idea was doomed to failure, because again, there was this huge lull after that initial launch showed so much promise, it really did go quiet. Apple has turned around with effectively what is a refresh to the arcade, with a pile of games that are a significant step up from what they launched with. Apple is doubling down on the vision that they have for the future of mobile games, and the results show a massive step up in terms of creative ideas and artistry. This is exactly what we needed to see the arcade develop into. Now, in an ideal world, once the Apple Arcade has stamped out free-to-play as the dominant force in mobile gaming, Apple could look to start to elevate developers beyond the scope of the subscription too. Because the reality is that for games as artworks to really fly, we do need to facilitate and enable those truly premium purchase once experiences. The revenue that developers derive from subscriptions isn't sustainable for a few different types of gameplay experiences, particularly the more experimental ones. The nature of subscriptions is that you need a lot of people to play your game for the relatively small amount of money you make per person to make sense for funding those games. And that's fine if you're creating this big mainstream game, but if you're a niche developer, you're just not going to be able to make enough money from the subscription for it to be worthwhile. And we do need to find ways to encourage them or to give them a market that they can reach out to. I don't think that Apple is going to be the one to do that, unfortunately, and of course, but if the Apple Arcade can continue to expand in the way that it is, we will at least be able to count on an outcome that mobile games are a place for creative ideas again, and that's something to be celebrated and looked forward to. It would be a wonderful win at a time where so much of the industry is going the other way, for Apple to actually bring mobile gaming back into a place where artists, genuine artists, have room to grow. Anyhow, that is enough for this video, and my voice, it is running on empty now. Still recovering from this cold, it seems. Thanks as always for tuning in. Please do consider liking and subscribing if you enjoy my videos. That way you will see them all as I upload them. And if you want to support what we're doing and help us to grow further, you can back us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month or more if you're feeling generous. And that will go, like I said, a long way to helping me to grow and invest in this channel. If you want to support us in another way, we do have a merchandise shop now featuring our very cute mascot Dee Dee and her friends. That has about 150 different goods on it now, from mugs and stationery through to clothing and even shower curtains. So you can find that link in the description below this video. Thanks as always for tuning in. It's great to be back, and we will see you at the next video.